Doesn't sound like a happy journey, does it? Leaves us kind of depressed a little bit. Leaves us feeling like, oh my, what more could possibly go wrong? At face value, this is not a happy passage, but it does deal with some very harsh realities in life. It rings true with us even if we don't understand the culture in which it was told. It's made even more poignant when we understand the helplessness and helplessness of Naomi, the widow. And it rings a significant bell with us. In a nation where, statistically, 90% of the women in the United States will die widows. And they will remain such. They will have been a widow for about 15 years. My father died February 19th, 2007. So my mom has been a widow now for about 8 years. And she was fortunate. My dad had cancer, so they knew that it was coming. There were no surprises. They had planned well together. Mom had a voice with my dad, and my dad took care of things. There was a life insurance policy. They had bought and paid for their home. They had sat down and talked about what life would be like after my dad, how many years, if she was careful with her resources, she could make it until that time came when she would have the house, which would be her final property that she could dispose of as she needed to continue on. Great care was taken for her to be provided for. And yet, there are a few things still that ring true. We visited with my mom last week, and she had a couple of chores for me, which is not unusual. I've always lived there. And one of the things I'm thankful for about being appointed here is that I am closer to my mom, that I can help out as I have had for most of my life, and yet we're not too far away from Lauren's parents that we can't slip over there and help them as well. But somehow, as Mom is getting a little bit older, the light bulbs don't change themselves quite the way they used to. And last week's chore was, can you come down to my garden with me because I'm having trouble with the sprinkler. I can't get it to go back and forth. It only goes a little bit this way. Can you see what's going on with it? And of course, I can look at it. And with my glasses, mind you, because I'm not exactly 18 anymore either, I can see that the little dial has been turned so that it only does that. So all we have to do is turn it this way like that. And we line it up so that it goes full. You know, you see the oscillating ones that go back and forth like that, and still make it go back and forth. See, even got, I can't see that, Walter. And my hand isn't strong enough anymore to turn that. My wrist won't do that where I've had surgery. It's a reality. My mom was fortunate to have a long-term plan in place. My grandmother also had a long-term plan in place when my grandfather died in the early 80s. But it was a little bit different. You see, my grandmother could not take care of herself. Although they owned their home, she had been mostly bedridden for years. And so, and had very limited capabilities for doing for herself with any length of time. And so it became very important for my mom, there were no sons, to take her in. My mom and dad took her in for several years. And she lived with them, and they provided for her and gave her a place to stay until such a time it was very clear that she could no longer remain with them. And she had to make a difficult decision of putting her mother in the nursing center. My other grandmother was a very proud woman. And she also was a widow ahead of her husband. And there was a retirement, and there was Social Security, And there was a family home. But being a proud woman and 8 hours away, until we got up there when she passed away, we could discover that she put on a very good front and really wasn't living on a lot. That life had provided challenges for her, that her life had changed. It was this kind of a situation that Naomi found herself in, where the irony is that Elimelech, and it does not say why they leave the land, and some commentaries will criticize Elimelech for taking his family out of the land. It just says that the Lord had caused there to be a famine, and there was a food shortage, and so they had to leave their home. Now, biblically speaking, this is not an unusual statement. That's how the Israelites wound up in Egypt in the first place. And even Joseph took Mary and newborn Jesus to Egypt. And so to sojourn for a while, and that's what that word is, it's behind to live in, to go to live in. To sojourn means to live there for a while, to dwell in safety and comfort for a while. The intent by those words were never that they would settle there indefinitely, that for a time they would live there until it was safe to go back. The irony in the words that escape us, because in English it doesn't transfer over in the same as the Hebrew. Bethlehem means house of bread. In the house of bread there was no food, and so therefore they had to go to Moab, where they heard that there was food. We don't know the reasons why. But we can kind of see between the lines what some possibilities are, because they said in that time the judges fled. And so it was in that time between when the people had been brought into the land after Moses by Joshua, and they had conquered the land, and it was after that, it was in the time of the judges when people the judges ended, and so people lived kind of as they saw fit. They forgot who God was, which was one of the primary reasons why God would, in the Old Testament, send pestilence or disease or hunger or famine or even war to the people, because in the people's understanding and the science of their time, if it didn't rain, it's because God was ticked off with us. If the crops failed, it was because God didn't like whatever we did. And over again in the Old Testament, the people have turned away from God. We call that apostasy. And God has caused things to happen to get their attention, to bring them back until they get right with God. And then He restores food, He restores safety, He restores comfort, He restores home. And so we do not blame Elimelech for leaving. In our own time, we have millions of people literally crossing borders because of war, because of famines caused by war, because of governments who don't take care of the people. And they cross over, they would rather come to a place where it is unknown, so that in the hope that they would have food, shelter, future, hope. And so we can imagine Elimelech packing up his family. And Naomi refers to herself as full, even in light of being hungry, and she's going to a place with her family. She has hope that is handed down because her very identity is there. And as a woman, she has proven herself because she has produced not one but 2 sons. Her life is full. And in 5 short sentences, her husband dies. And her sons die. She no longer has means or identity, income, security. She's lowered to begging for food. And she has 2 extra mouths in her family. She has the women that her sons married. And over again, they are referred to as Moabites. They married 2 Moabite women. They named them. But in every instance, all the way through this chapter, they are referred to as the Moabite women. They married 2 Moabites. I can't say that with disdain enough. If you know anything, if you remember from your Old Testament history, the Moabites descend the union between Lot and his two daughters in a cave at a time when the two daughters thought that there was no hope, that the whole world was destroyed around them, and the only hope that they had for carrying on family name, for having a future, was to get their father drunk and have their way with them in the cave. You remember that story? Well, that's where the Moabites came from in the Bible. And so for the Israelites, the chosen people who were to keep themselves pure before God, before whom they were to do no wrong, the Moabites were definitively on the other side of the tracks. Now maybe that makes you uncomfortable, maybe not. I feel like I was kind of born on the other side of the tracks, but not so much as other folks, and so being on the other side isn't necessarily uncomfortable for me. But I do know that if you're not of the right breeding, if you're not of the right place, even in today's society, people look down on you. Further, when the people were coming back in the Exodus to the land, it's the Moabites that time and again refused to help the Israelites. In fact, they even attacked them. They saw them as fearful. There was enmity, dissension between the Moabites and the Israelites. So for the writer to say, and her two sons, who had married Moabite women, they died. There's huge implications there. But it doesn't say that they died because of that marriage. What it says, that at a time that even in that land away from home, even in that land away from the home of milk and honey, even in that place, word came to them that the Lord had considered his people and given them food. You see, in the Old Testament understanding, God was responsible for providing food and also for fertility. So these two threads are constantly running through this story. And God is providing back home. And the one thing that we said, that when all else fails and nobody else will take you back, I can go home. So Naomi says, it's time to go home. And she sets out from that place, she and her two daughters-in-law, and they were on their way back. She does something very incredible here. She says, go back, each of you, to your mother's house. You see, what's missed in the story, possibly, is that we focus at this point on Naomi, who is a widow, who is now childless. But the two daughters are also widows. They are also grieving. They also have their challenges. And in a time when most marriages were not romantic, like Hollywood portrays Ruth, but were more contractual, more of a business contract, where for this sum of money, a dowry and consideration of the alignment of our houses together and maybe the consolidation of our belongings, and this woman who is healthy and young comes with a dowry, and she will provide you with children. That is what her job is, remember, and she has no say in it whatsoever. They have none of that. And not only that, if they've been married for 10 years, to the original hearers, they would have realized they must be barren. They can't do what they're supposed to do. They are worthless. But Naomi says something very interesting. She tells them, basically, I thank you for your experience. What are the words exactly she says? She says, go back and may the Lord deal kindly. And that word for kindly in here is hesed. It's a very important word as we go forward in the next couple of weeks. Hesed means kindness, but and we often translate it as unfailing love, God's unfailing love. But it's kindness and compassion that goes above and beyond the responsibility, above and beyond what is expected. And she says, may the Lord deal kindly with you for going above and beyond as you have dealt with the dead, my sons, and also with me. Even though they were Moabites, she acknowledges that they had gone above and beyond the call of duty when they could have left her because there were no sons left. When they could have left her and abandoned her, they did not. They stayed with her, and they're even willing to follow her home. And she acknowledges the kindness, the hesed of these two ladies. And may the Lord grant you that you find security. Remember, if they go back home, they can be cared for. They might find another husband, even if they've been barren for 10 years. But when you get over to Israel, there is nothing, no hope of that. Eventually, Orpah says, kisses her mother, which essentially is saying goodbye. She goes home. It would be easy to judge Orpah as the weakest of the two, and to lift Ruth up as doing what she was supposed to do. But that's not true. Orpah is acknowledged by Naomi as having gone above and beyond the call of duty. She's done above and beyond. She's given kindness, she's given love, she's given comfort, she's given support, even in her time. And thinking it through, she's done more than what was expected. And at this time, to be invited to go home, to be released from that responsibility any further, she does the prudent thing. She does what is expected. She does what most of us would do. She goes home. And what that reminds me is, you know what? In life, we have significant challenges. In life, we have times and moments where there are no good answers. Where the answers that we have to give are not the answers that we want to give. And they are painful. When is it that I will have to go with my sisters and take my mother's keys and help her out of her home? When is it that we say to our child, "Oh, child whom I love, I have done everything that I can for you. I can do no more. You have to be on your own." When is it that we're faced? Here's the realities of your illness. You can do this, and you can do this. Neither is great. And the passage tells us that she did what she thought was best. But Ruth does not. In fact, Ruth uses the passage that is lifted out of here for, and we use it sometimes in weddings, but it's completely ripped out of the context. The first place, and we don't use this part, it says, "Do not press me to leave you or turn back from following you." So you see, Naomi is trying to convince Ruth that she has to go back. That that's the only choice there is. She's trying to make a decision for Ruth. And in some ways, as the elder, she has that right. But in some ways, at this moment, at this time, Ruth asserts herself and says, "No, do not press me to lead you or turn back from following you." And this is the part that we lift up for some wedding ceremonies. It says, "Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. And your people will be my people, and my God, your God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me, and more as well." Ruth is taking an incredible risk. If Ruth had turned back, she might have had a chance with her own family. But remember, she is a widow. She is without child from all appearances, possibly barren. She has no family, no father to negotiate in the new land where she will be a Moabite. She has no leverage of support. She has a thin thread that Naomi might be related to someone there, but Naomi is old. And maybe I should put that in perspective. Right now, it's not unusual for us to live well into our 70s, 80s, and beyond. In the time of Ruth, the average life expectancy was 40. And so Naomi, who would have, when a woman was married, was in her mid-teens, and Elimelech, the men were typically married at around age 20, so they have raised sons, and so they go forward till old enough for them to be married. So that puts her somewhere in the vicinity of 35, and 10 years has gone by. My goodness, Naomi is an old woman. I'm not being smacked yet by some of us who are a little north of the 30 line. But that's the reality of the time. And when she says, you got to go back. Because I have no sons, and even if I was married on this day, even if this night I had 2 sons, would you wait another 20 years when you are just as old as I am now to marry them? And would they? And Ruth says, I'm going to follow you anyway. And I'm going to go into a place that when you die, I have nothing except my bond with you and my faith in your God. And what that says to me is even though Naomi is at her weakest, her lowest moment, it's a reminder that she was not alone. That she has significant value. And that she had hope. And that even in her time of her lowest faith, when she was complaining about God, and when she was concerned and confused and had doubts, and she would blame her God for all the bad things that happened, which is another conversation, because God doesn't do bad things, but God is with us, and we will see that in this story. But her testimony of faith as she lived was enough to sway Ruth to say, I'm going to follow your God. I will go where you go, and I will be of your people, because there's something about this that I want. There's something else in this. You know, we all have our challenges in life. But no matter how far we fall, how low we believe we have gone, we can still reach outside of ourselves and go beyond what is expected to help one another, to provide for one another. And this short chapter of Ruth shows us that hope, that has said that unfailing love. And it takes us to a place where they return. She says, my name is not Naomi, which means pleasant. It is Mara, which means bitter. I am bitter, but I'm home. I brought some Moabites with me. And the chapter ends by saying that they had arrived just before the harvest season, a glimmer of hope. You see, no matter where we are in our journey, God is with us. And if we put our own glasses back on, our own lenses on, we can see, you know what? This story doesn't end here. We know that the God that Naomi had faith in, the God in whom Ruth took faith, had a story to tell. And it wasn't over. And we followed that thread all the way through this book down to Jesus Christ, in whom we hold our hope, and we place our hope, and our eternal life. I want to leave you with a question. Who is it? Maybe it's yourself. Maybe it's someone you know. Who's lost all hope? Who's facing life challenges? This is the third service that did that. When the phone rang and reminded me that it was time to wrap it up. I was just standing here wondering if that was going to happen. I'm sure that's who it is, Kathy. It's God saying, end this, all right? Wrap it up. We got a song to sing. Life will throw us curveballs. It is not easy. We will have choices where there aren't always good answers. but God remains with us in all of it. And we, you and I, reflect God and His Son. Who around you needs His Son? Unfailing love, compassion, mercy, and hope. How will we live that? As the church and as individuals. What does that look like for you? I'll give you examples. Some of you have timers at home that go off to dinner. Amen.